Welcome to Coffee and Conversation. My name is Honorine, and today I'm with Nella Delva, who is doing a PhD in biomedical science. Welcome, Nella.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm very happy to have the chance to get to know you better. So, can you tell me more about yourself? Who is Nella Delva?
Ooh, there's so many different assets of my personality and my professional life. That's a very loaded question. But my name is Nella Delva, and I am a third year PhD student in biomedical sciences. Um, in the College of Medicine, basically, that's where it's located. My research focus is mainly mood regulation, specifically depression, and looking at dysregulation of dopamine receptors um, and what is affecting basically depression. Um, so, Nella, I'm originally from Haiti, but I've lived in Florida for almost half my life. So,
Okay.
I'm still Haitian because, but I'm Haitian American
Mm-hmm.
um, because I've lived in both places 15 years. So I identify with both cultures at this point. But yeah, I think that's about it about me so far.
Okay, so how did you get interested into the topic of depression?
Um, so I did a lot of work and research in biomedical and biological research in general. So depression is really a new neuroscience in general is a new interest of mine. Um, when I got introduced to research in my undergraduate years, I started doing research with zebrafish.
Fish?
And yeah, so it was biological science research, and we were looking at alcohol fetal syndrome, but more using zebrafish as a model system. So we were exposing the zebrafish with alcohol when they're in their embryos, different concentration with alcohol.
Okay,
And
like
then,
alcohol that you can drink.
yes,
Okay.
ethanol, yes. um, and they were looking into their neurons and how, their axons were being um, kind of shortened or dysregulated because of the exposure to a different concentration of ethanol. So, and then, after that, I got my master's in cancer, specifically HPV virus, and yeah, and how HPV pushes the basic cells to become cancerous over time. Um, so that was different, and I really liked that, looking into cancer biology and stuff like that. So I that was a different field at the time, getting my master's thesis on. I moved on and worked for a few years at a cancer research hospital. Yeah, so I got immersed in the cancer world, cancer research world for a few years, about 6 to 7 years, before I decided to go back and get my PhD. Um, so I truly wanted to be exposed to different research. When I chose FSU, I think what attracted me to their program was that they have a variety of research fields that I could try, different labs that have different interests. So in my program particularly, you can do rotations. So yeah, I've rotated in different labs, virus labs and neuroscience labs, and so I can really find my interest in what I really like to do. So I ended up, picking in neuroscience, and that, because depression really intrigued me, and I wanted to go back to what interested me with research and science since I was an undergrad. So that's what brought me back into this world of neuroscience and depression. Yeah. So that's the
Would you,
story.
would you say that working in research, like with cancer, you were kind of like, okay, I think that's not what I want to do forever, and I want to find something new, or after your working experience when you went back to grad school, you thought that you would stay into cancer research?
I really thought I was going to stay into cancer research because I truly enjoy biological research and biomedical research. And having worked in the field of, like, having worked after my master's, really solidify how much I liked being in the lab and, looking into biological processes. So I honestly really liked what I was doing in cancer research. However, it wasn't until I went back to get my PhD and I was re-exposed to neuroscience that I felt like, oh, that was one of the main reasons why I was attracted to the field of biological, research in the first place when I was an undergrad. So I decided to go back into really what had started this whole interest and passion in the first place.
Why did you go back to grad school?
My environment at the time was one of the main reason why I decided to go back to grad school, because I was exposed to so much beautiful work and beautiful persons around me that encouraged me all the time and they saw potential in me and they wanted to make sure that I grew in that field. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't all me. It was a lot of wonderful influences around me. Also, it was a lot of people that saw potential. That's basically the answer to that.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
That's all we
thank you.
want. That's great. And so to go back to your actual research, your current research, how do you study depression? Do you study it on people, or is it more? I don't know. I see a Microsoft behind you. I'm into literature. I have no idea how this thing
Um,
works.
yeah, that's a good question. We use mice as a model system. For my research, and particularly, we knocked out the D1 receptor gene. So the dopamine gene that I'm sure there's a lot of love talking about dopamine, serotonin. I mean, I like to talk to people that dopamine has a lot of roles into different, addiction and depression and anxiety. So it doesn't, it's not entirely like love.
Yeah.
So dopamine. So I focus on dopamine D1 receptor gene. So there's different type of dopamine. There's D1, D2, D3, D5. So my focus is D1 because we found that it's important in mood regulation, specifically if depression. In my case. So we try to get rid of it, basically in specific area of the brain, and see if that creates any resistance to stress. So basically, one of the reasons why a lot, people are just are depressed or eventually get depression is because of exposure to stress, a constant and chronic acute exposure to stress. So we want to model that in our mice. Basically, we expose them to, taking out this dopamine. Is that going to make any difference in the resistance to stress? Therefore, that is a clue to, or if the resistance to stress means that they won't have depression later in life. We look at their brain tissues in the microscope, as you see here. We slide the brain.
Ooh.
They do get killed now because it's the only way we can have access to their brain. And there's a whole concept of animal welfare, making sure that they don't suffer. They get we make sure that they're not into pain, and if they know the antibiotics, like there's a whole animal welfare guide that we adhere to. So it's not cruel. I just want to put that out there. But we do have a whole system to help us guide us through, and we get approved for our experimental procedures by a veterinarian that works with us. So yeah, it's very interesting once you get into this field. So
Yeah.
yeah.
in today's society, we talk a lot about depression regarding social media and how that has a huge impact, especially on the young population.
Hmm.
But since you, so that was why originally I wanted to know if you were working with humans or with animals, because I suppose that with your mice, you cannot test the effect of social media, right?
I'm not familiar with that. There's other scientists that just looking into human behavior solely without looking into biological processes. But there's a lot of technology where you can also put different. You can look at MRIs, and they don't have you, you don't have to kill a human to look into their brain now.
I hope so.
So you can look at MRIs and different other that I'm not familiar with. I'm not familiar with those technologies at all. But there's other ways that you can look at human brains for that. So yeah.
And so besides your research, what do you do with your free time? Because Coffee and Conversation was originally created um,
Um,
to, like, you know, be able to have graduate students to connect with each other because we are in this new virtual time. And so, as graduate students, because I'm also a third year PhD, it's very important to take care of ourselves, and kind of move away a little bit sometimes, once in a while, from the research. But now that we are at home, with the research being at home, how do you deal with that?
so we've zoomed a lot, trying to get rid of this, or at least trying to find ways to be socially connected,
Mm-hmm.
because it's extremely important now that I'm in the neuroscience field. I understand more of the importance of being socially connected because it does maintain the balance of the biological balance in our brain, and it's important. Especially if you're not an introvert. I know some introverts are happy right now about this quarantine.
I'm like
Um,
you, I'm an extrovert, so.
yes, I love interacting with people. It really allowed me to just sit down and, force me to do some reading. And thankfully, because I'm the type of person who needs to have a goal,
Hmm.
so I decided to just go ahead, I'm going to read to publish this review. So I, thankfully I was able to do so. I read it, did a little research, and did the writing, and then at the beginning of 2021, which was January, I was able to publish it. So
Congratulations.
thank you. It was. I mean, I didn't know it was going to happen that way. I was just, trying to figure out how to find some productivity and normalcy during that time, where I can, in the beginning, we weren't allowed to come out in the lab at all.
Okay.
And I was a little depressed, and that's when I figured out I really do have a passion for this because I was a little depressed. I was like, oh, I can't go to lab. I don't understand what's going on. Now I'm back in the lab. I'm happy again, but I do miss my friends and hanging out and karaoke the normal way.
So now you're back in the lab, like it used to be. You have fully access or full access, or is it
um,
restricted somehow?
I'm the only graduate student, so I feel unrestricted in some ways, but there's still restrictions for graduate student in my department. Yeah.
And how would you describe your day? How do you organize your day to still keep time for yourself? Like, what are your extracurricular activities?
Oh, yeah. So I work out 5 days a week. And that's because I do have a trainer and I do pay him. So I'm like, I need to get my money's worth.
I
I
agree
need
with that. I signed up for spin, and every day before I go, I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have. But I paid, so I'm like, I have to
You
go.
have to
It's the
go.
best
Yes.
motivation.
That's exactly how I feel. Every single day I feel like I go there, I'm like so mad for some reason. I'm like, I'm so sore. Why did I do this? But I'm like, I'm not gonna lose my money, so I'm showing up.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's one thing that I do to help my sanity a lot. I feel like, especially last year when COVID was new and scarier. It's still scary and new, but last year was even the anxiety of it all.
I
was
think you got used to it.
yeah, I think that's what it is. It's still in there, but working out helped me a lot through that. So that's one thing I do for myself. I make sure that I just do things that I like, such as Netflixing.
Hmm.
I'm a huge docu-series nerdy type
Me
of
too.
Netflixer.
I love Netflix documentary.
I learned so much. I'm so excited if I find a good docu-series. I binge through it like crazy.
All right. Well, that was such an interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. Um,
Thank you.
thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed talking with you and, talking about my research and my hobbies and stuff like that.